I never thought my life would come to this. One moment, I was a wife, a mother, a woman with certainty. The next, I was abandoned. Dan had said he was going to the corner shop to get a newspaper. I remember the moment so clearly. The way he reached for his coat, the way his voice carried an easy, careless lilt. There was no hesitation, no telltale signs. Just an ordinary Saturday morning. Until it wasn't. Hours passed, then a full day. My calls went unanswered, my texts unread. And then, the message came. Sue, I'm in Paris. It's over. 8 words that shattered me. The betrayal was like a slow-burning fire, spreading through my veins, scorching everything in its path. I read and reread those words until my eyes blurred. Paris, with her, a woman young enough to be his daughter, a woman who hadn't carried his child, who hadn't stayed up nursing his flu, who hadn't waited patiently through his failures and triumphs. She had simply arrived, and just like that, he was hers. The public saw my dignity, but they never saw the nights. The nights was something else. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my body aching with the weight of loss. I would stretch my hand to his side of the bed, feeling the cold, untouched sheets, and a fresh wave of pain would crash over me. The silence was unbearable. My fingers curled around the duvet, gripping it as if it could somehow anchor me. It never did. At times, I whispered his name into the emptiness, as though it could summon him back. But ghosts don't return. And that's what Dan had become, a ghost in the life we built together, a specter that haunted every inch of this house. I did not seek revenge. Revenge implied passion, and I was drained of it. What remained was something quieter, something darker, a grief so deep it had no name. Instead, I learned to move through my days like a shadow of myself, teaching my students, smiling when required, exchanging pleasantries with neighbors. I was functional, but inside, I was hollow. People whispered. I heard them. Poor Sue. Such a shame. Who would have thought? I ignored them. Pity was useless. It couldn't rebuild my life. It couldn't stitch my heart back together. And yet, despite it all, I still loved him. How could I not? Love doesn't vanish on command. It lingers in the spaces where someone used to be, in the scent of their clothes, in the indentation of their pillow. But I knew one thing for certain. That corner of my life had fallen silent, then had walked away without looking back. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I did the same. Saturday used to be ours. Dan and I would take turns driving Lily to football practice, cheering from the sidelines, sharing knowing glances as we sipped coffee from the same flask. We weren't the loudest parents, but we were present. A team, a unit. But now, it was just me. The football field stretched out before me, a vibrant green under the morning sun. Parents gathered in familiar clusters, mothers and fathers side by side, leaning into each other's warmth, laughing over inside jokes. Some men had their arms slung casually around their wives. Others pressed quick kisses to their partner's temple as they watched their kids play. I used to be them. I used to have that. Now, I sat alone on the hard bench, my fingers curled around a lukewarm coffee cup, my body hollow, my heart aching in a way that felt unbearable. The other moms were kind, in that hesitant, cautious way people are when they don't know what to say. Some asked about Dan, their voices laced with pity, their eyes shifting uncomfortably when I responded with a practiced smile. Oh, his, gone, I would say, leaving it at that. I refused to be their spectacle, the tragic wife left behind. But inside, I was crumbling. Every Saturday, as Lily ran onto the field, her ponytail bouncing with every step, I felt the weight of absence press harder against my chest. I told myself I was here for her, that I was enough, that I could do this alone. But the truth was that the sight of other couples, of fathers shouting encouragement to their kids, of men pulling their wives close against the autumn breeze, it was all a cruel reminder. Dan should have been here, but Dan was in Paris, with her. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. I imagined him walking cobbled streets, laughing in that way that used to be just for me, whispering secrets into her ear. Did he hold her the way he once held me? Did she know that he used to hate the sound of his alarm in the morning, that he liked his tea with exactly 1.5 sugars? Did she even know what she had taken? I swallowed hard and forced my gaze back to the field. Lily looked my way, searching for me. I lifted my hand and waved, forcing my lips into something that resembled a smile. For her, I had to be okay. But when I got home, when I closed the door to our half-empty house, when I walked past his untouched bookshelves, when I lay in the bed he abandoned, that was when the real loneliness set in. That was when the silence of what he left behind became deafening. And that was when I let myself break. The house felt different now. I used to love coming home. It had been a place of warmth, of routine, of quiet, steady love. Now, it was just walls and echoes, a cavernous space filled with ghosts of the life I thought I had. When I turned the key in the lock, the silence pressed against me like a weight. The house smelled the same. His cologne still lingered in the fabric of the couch, the faint scent of wood polish on the banister, but everything else had changed. Dan's absence was loud. I kicked off my shoes and walked into the kitchen, turning on the kettle out of habit. He used to do this. Boil the water while I got settled. Hand me a cup of tea before I even asked. Now, I had to remember to take care of myself, to go through the motions of a life that no longer felt like mine. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. He was supposed to be here. I reached for my phone, almost on instinct, before catching myself. There were no messages from him, no check-ins, no apologies, just silence. It was always worst in the evenings. During the day, I could distract myself, work, errands, Lily's needs. But at night, when the house grew still, when the wind rattled the windows, when the hum of the fridge was the only sound keeping me company, that was when the loneliness became unbearable. I avoided the bedroom for as long as I could. Instead, I curled up on the couch with a blanket, the TV playing a show I wasn't watching. Anything to avoid slipping under those covers alone. Anything to keep from feeling the emptiness on the other side of the bed. I tried reading, but my mind wandered. I tried writing in a journal, but the words felt too raw, too exposed. I tried wine, but it only made me weep. Some nights, I let myself crumble. I let the sobs come, curling into myself like a child, shaking with the weight of grief I couldn't seem to put down. I mourned him like a widow, even though he was still alive, somewhere in Paris, with her. But other nights, I fought. I lit candles. I played music that reminded me of who I was before him. I wrapped myself in Lily's old baby blanket, the one I kept in the linen closet, untouched for years, just to feel something familiar, something safe. I reminded myself that I still existed, that I was still here, that I was more than the woman he left behind. And slowly, in the quiet solitude of my home, I began to believe it. The sky was the kind of blue you only see in postcards, endless, untouched, a shade so perfect it almost felt unreal. The waves lapped against the shore in a lazy rhythm, the scent of salt and sunscreen thick in the air. Laughter floated from couples strolling hand in hand, from families building sandcastles, from honeymooners lost in their own little worlds. And then there was me, sitting under a wide-brimmed sun hat, sunglasses covering eyes that had cried too much, watching my daughter, Lily, dart in and out of the water, her joy untainted, her laughter free. This was supposed to be our family holiday. Dan and I had planned it together, back when we were still we. The brochure was still at home, tucked into a drawer I hadn't yet had the courage to clean out. Tenerife had been his idea. He had talked about sipping sangria on the balcony, about moonlit walks along the shore, about all the ways we would steal moments for ourselves while Lily made friends at the hotel's kids' club. But now, it was just the two of us. I had almost cancelled. The thought of navigating the holiday alone, surrounded by families whole and intact, had been too much. But Lily had been so excited. "Mum, we have to go. You promised." And so I kept my promise. At the resort, everything was a reminder of what I had lost. The couple next to us at breakfast, whispering over coffee, her hand resting lightly on his. The father in the pool, tossing his giggling toddler into the air. The pair at the bar, fingers intertwined over cocktails, looking at each other like they were the only two people in the world. Everywhere I turned, I saw what I no longer had. I swallowed the ache, plastered a smile on my face, and did my best. I took Lily on boat rides, snapped photos of her playing in the sand, treated us to fancy dinners. But there was no one to share the knowing glances with, no one to take turns chasing Lily through the waves, no one to lean into when the loneliness threatened to swallow me whole. The nights were the hardest, sitting alone on the hotel balcony, a glass of wine untouched beside me. I stared out at the vast ocean, wondering if he ever thought of me, if he missed this, if Paris was everything he had imagined. I let myself grieve in the quiet, but I also let myself breathe. Lily's laughter still rang in the air. The sun still set in a blaze of color, streaks of pink and orange painting the sky. The waves still rolled in, steady and sure, just as they always had. And I reminded myself, this pain, this ache, this loneliness, it wouldn't last forever. One day, the weight of his absence wouldn't feel so heavy. One day, I wouldn't feel like half of a whole. One day, I would sit by the ocean and feel something other than loss. But for now, I held on to what I had left, and that was enough. Coming home from Tenerife felt like stepping into a quiet battlefield. The trip had been a test of endurance. Every happy couple, every moment that highlighted Dan's absence had been like a fresh wound. But I had survived, and something inside me had shifted. For months, I had existed in grief, a silent prisoner of my own heartbreak. I had let the pain dictate my every move, what I ate, how I slept or didn't, how I moved through the world as if I were a ghost of the woman I used to be. But something about that trip, about facing my pain in the bright sun instead of hiding in the shadows, had sparked something inside me. I was tired of being broken, tired of letting Dan's betrayal define me, tired of being the woman abandoned for someone younger, the woman people pitied in whispers. I didn't want to drown in sorrow anymore. I wanted to fight. The first thing I did was move my body, not in a desperate attempt to erase what had happened, but to remind myself that I was alive. I started waking up early, lacing up my trainers, and going for long walks before dawn. At first, my steps were sluggish, my body protesting, my mind clouded with memories. But as the days passed, my stride grew stronger. The fresh air, the burn in my muscles, the steady rhythm of my feet against the pavement, it became a kind of therapy. And with every mile, I left a little more of the old Sue behind. Loneliness had been my greatest enemy. The silence of an empty house after years of companionship had been deafening. But instead of fearing it, I decided to fill it. I picked up a book I had abandoned months ago, losing myself in its pages instead of scrolling through old text messages. I joined a community reading group, not because I wanted to make friends, but because I needed to hear other people's voices, to step outside the small world of my sorrow. I signed up for an online course in creative writing, something I had always wanted to do but never found time for. In the quiet of the evenings, instead of staring at my phone, I wrote. At first, it was just small journal entries, my pain, my anger, my hope. Then, stories, fictional worlds where women found their strength, where they reclaimed their happiness. It was healing in a way I never expected. For so long, I had avoided mirrors. I had avoided seeing myself because I didn't recognize the woman staring back. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I stood in front of the mirror and forced myself to look, really look. I wasn't just a woman scorned. I wasn't just a wife left behind. I wasn't just a mother trying to hold it together. I was Sue, a woman who had loved deeply and lost painfully, a woman who was still standing, despite it all, a woman who had more life left to live. I smiled at my reflection, hesitant, unsure, but real. For the first time in a long time, I believed that someday I would be happy again. Maybe not today, maybe not even tomorrow, but one day, and that was enough to keep going.